We're in our third week of our sermon series for the living of these days. And we're going to turn to the Gospel of Luke and hear a story about Jesus and the disciples and their encounter with the Pharisees. And so I want you to listen for the word of the Lord to all of us this day. One Sabbath, while Jesus was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked some heads of grain, rubbed them in their hands, and ate them. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and gave some to his companions." Then he said to them, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I recently heard a parable, and it's really been working on me. It goes like this. A boatman had been out early one morning, and he was on his way back into the dock. It was foggy, and it was really hard to see, and he was going far too fast, and he hit another boat in the fog. He immediately kills his motor. He jumps to the bow of his boat, and he starts screaming at the other boat, "You jerk, you need to look out where you're going. I can't believe you." And then the fog lifts for just a moment, and the man sees that there's actually nobody in the other boat. In fact, he can see that the other boat has its anchor out. And then the man feels like a fool. I've never hit a parked boat in the fog, but I've certainly been in that water. I've been on that boat. I imagine you have too. We've all been in the water of judgment. We've all been in that water of self-righteousness. That state of believing that you were in the right, that you were correct, that you were going about life or work or love with what you believed to be the best of intentions. But really deep down, you had an inkling that your motivations were fueled by high-grade ego, 93 octane. It usually takes hitting a boat in the fog or being exposed to our true intentions enough to humble us. The fog of the moment lifts. It leaves us feeling vulnerable and perhaps with just a hint of shame still present. Ever been there? Maybe not on an actual boat, but in the wake of shame, when you thought you were being righteous, when you were really just trying to be right. Surely you know that place. I certainly do. I imagine if the Pharisees are completely honest, if they are completely vulnerable, that's the place they find themselves in after their interaction with Jesus from our passage this morning. Were the Pharisees really most interested in the fulfillment of the law and the Sabbath? Or were they motivated by something altogether different? I think the Pharisees were hiding in the tall grass. They were waiting for the moment to catch Jesus and the disciples technically breaking the law. And I think they're waiting there in order to fulfill their own self-righteousness. Oh, I don't think they were in pursuit of holiness. Oh no, I imagine the Pharisees feel threatened. You know, the way that they understand the world, the way that they understand and order their lives, the values they hold, Jesus has questioned all of that. And I can understand the Pharisees feeling threatened, even being a bit defensive, and wanting to stake their own moral high ground. Oh, I think that's what leads them to wait on Jesus and the disciples, so that they can prove that they were right, that they had won. And here's the thing. They proved they were right, which is the definition of self-righteousness, is it not? How many of us haven't salivated at some point over this last year, waiting for someone on social media to finally be humbled, or for our particular opinion about COVID to prove its point? Remember when it was merely enough for our team to win? You know, the Bible has much to say about righteousness and self-righteousness. And I found the teaching of Richard Rohr on this topic of great help. And he says, to our post-Puritan, post-Victorian ears, righteousness is a synonym for virtue. It means being moral, behaving correctly. But in Israel of Jesus' time, righteousness was something much more dynamic. Visualize it as a force field, an energy-charged sphere of holy presence. To be in the righteousness of God means to be directly connected to this vibrational field, to be anchored within God's own aliveness. There is nothing subtle about the experience. It is as fierce and transient as a bond as picking up a downed electrical wire. To hunger and thirst after righteousness then speaks to this intensity of connectedness. So that means self-righteousness is about proving your own righteousness. And righteousness, at least in the biblical perspective, then is a byproduct of being connected to the divine, being connected to God. As we seek to live these days, I want to invite us to recognize the places in our lives where we might be living out of our own righteousness. And let me be clear, this isn't a zero-sum game. I mean, we're human. We have egos. We're gonna be self-righteous. But I want to invite us to notice the places that we tend to be most self-righteous in our lives. I think those places may be revealing something deeper about where we might be feeling vulnerable or threatened or defensive, just like the Pharisees. And what if we recognize those places and then we asked, where's the energy-charged presence of the divine in this? Or another way of asking, is there another way to live? Because my friends, when we hunger and thirst after righteousness, when we seek to be present to the energy-charged presence of the divine, I believe that it transforms how we live. I believe it transforms how we live in the world. I believe it transforms how we see one another. And a byproduct of our lives is the righteousness of God. It moves us beyond merely knowing our faith and our faith taking on the flesh in the world. Several years ago, my friend Pam was driving on the interstate late at night. She wasn't paying attention as she merged from the left lane into the right lane. She didn't see the pickup truck that was just over her right shoulder in the right lane. And as she merged over, she hit him. And as soon as the cars collided, her car began to spin back across the left lane, and she said she was gripping the steering wheel and just yelling. She was readying herself for impact as soon as she smashed into the guardrail. When her car finally came to a rest, she said she was still gripping the steering wheel. Her eyes were really wide. She was trying to catch her breath when she looked up out of her window, and the man from the truck was standing there. She said she braced herself for him to yell and to scream at her, to ask her why she wasn't paying attention. And instead, the man looked at her and said, "Oh my goodness, are you okay? No, really, are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm here. It's going to be okay. No one else was injured. I've already called for help. I just want to make sure you're okay." It was a simple act. It was a simple act of caring, of having empathy for someone who harmed you. And in that small encounter are all the laws and all the prophets. It's the good news made manifest by the grace of God. And it reveals the righteousness of God. So may that be true in your life and my life this day and all of our days. May it be so. Amen.